This is the presentation for the proposed service changes for January 2022. My name is Christina Zazueta, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager with RTD, and I'm joined by Jesse Carter, Acting Senior Manager for Service Development, along with several of our staff members here to help answer your questions this evening around the proposed service changes. Before we get into the details of the changes that are proposed, just a couple RTD updates that I'd like to share with you. We recently this summer began a fare study and equity analysis, and currently we have a request for consultant proposals out, and we are hoping to get a consultant on board by the end of the year / beginning of next year who will help us with the process, because this study is going to take around 18 months total. The fare study components that we already have done are some preliminary surveys to ask about what people think about our fare structures. And as we move forward and into early part of next year, you will likely be seeing us out in the community doing some engagement, pushing out some surveys, not only asking about the fares and the fare structure, but also having an equity analysis component, which is critical as we make any changes to our fares and or passes. So again, we'll be seeing that at the beginning of the year, and please check in on our website around that time, or likely you'll see something in our newsletters and social media to find ways to plug in and keep in touch with the process. Also, earlier this year, the RTD board approved an updated study for the Fast Tracks Northwest Rail Line, which is the rail line that currently goes from downtown to Westminster. The rest of the track has been unfunded and therefore has not been built. And so it's been several years since RTD has done a study for the area, and the rest of the line would be from Westminster all the way up through Longmont and Boulder. And so the study would then explore any changes that have happened since the last time we did the initial study. Of course, since that time we did the initial study, there's things that are changes like population changes. Perhaps we now have some new business centers or new employers, larger employers. And of course, the way people travel has changed. So that's what the study will take under consideration. And that's expected to begin in earnest early or to spring next year. Also, RTD's board, along with our general manager, Deborah Johnson, put together a strategic plan, and that was adopted on August 10th. And what that means to all of our customers is that the elements of the strategic plan will be rolled out in a unified fashion over, of course, the course of the next several years, and anything that we do. So as we deliver services and think about the customer experience, there is a strategic plan that's tied to that, as well as some metrics. If you're curious and want to see the actual strategic plan, you can visit our website and search for the plan. Also upcoming, a couple of, actually several ways for you to continue to engage and provide us comments on everything, even outside of service and service changes. We have 15 district telephone town halls, and those are going to begin next week on October 13th and run through November 3rd. Visit our website, rtd-denver.com/town hall to find out more. You could pre-register. So what that means is if you are interested in participating, you could pre-register your phone and you'll receive a call when the event starts. That way you don't forget. All right, so some of the things that we hear often is a lot of questions around what is RTD doing to make sure that everything is safe for customers and passengers along the way. So we do currently have a federal mandate in place, and that's from the Federal Transit Administration, and that runs through January 18th of 2022. So that is an extension of what was already in place. It was due to expire in September, but the FTA has pushed it out to January. So that tells us that, of course, depending on what is going on with the pandemic, some things could change. There could be even further extensions for this mandate. It's very similar to what you would see when you're traveling on an airplane. So you go through TSA and you have a mask that's required. And we're really relying on our customers to help us do this and make sure that masks are being worn on our vehicles and as you're waiting on a platform or at a bus stop and you're around others. So safety is everyone's responsibility, and we hope that everyone is wearing the masks. We understand that, not everyone does it all the time. But again, we are mandated to do so, and so are our service providers. We also do daily cleaning and sanitizing of the vehicles, and we have installed some see-through operator barriers to keep our operators and customers safe. And we have also distributed supplies to both employees and customers throughout the pandemic. And fortunately, we are able to continue doing so as everything continues moving. All right, so a little bit a background on ridership as we've gone through the pandemic, and all of this is critical to what we're going to discuss here as far as service changes. When the pandemic first hit, we went into a COVID-19 service plan, which went into effect in April of last year. We are still under that service plan, and we are making adjustments as we're seeing changes in travel patterns and needs for transportation come back. And we're keeping a close eye on all of this as we move forward. So when that plan went into effect, we were initially carrying about 40% of pre-pandemic ridership. So that was kind of like our demand at the time, 40% of our regular ridership. And we were providing 60% of pre-pandemic service. We have seen that ridership has slowly increased this year. So to give you a little bit of perspective, it's increased 11.8% from January to June, which is incredibly encouraging. And we continue to look at that and adjust as we move forward as best we can. During a good portion of the last year and a half, there was a vehicle capacity limit, which helped us create some social distancing, but we were able to lift that in June of this year. And so now we're able to provide services as we regularly have been. And it's been a question I hear occasionally is, are you still requiring the social distancing and the capacity limits? The answer is no, we're not requiring the capacity limits. You can travel as you did before, but again, make sure you're wearing a mask. We are now currently carrying about 50% of pre-pandemic ridership, so we are not all the way there yet. We're not seeing the demand as it was before, and we're providing about 70% of that pre-pandemic service, so we're keeping just above where the current ridership demand is. And so there have been some financial impacts as we've moved through the pandemic, and that's happened the same across many industries and agencies. Our sales tax and fare revenues have been down, and that's our primary source of income. And so we're projecting that that means a financial impact through 2026. We did receive about 3 rounds of federal funding, and it's been utilized in different fashions. Mostly all of this funding is prescriptive, meaning that it's meant to be used within certain boundaries. For example, the first round of funding had to be used in 2020, and we used all that money towards keeping our operators, keeping service, and of course, all the equipment that we were not anticipating spending on to keep people safe, but we were fortunate to have that funding. Moving forward, we expect that this funding, totaling about $774.1 million, will support about 85% of pre-pandemic service hours through the year 2026. So we are being very cautious on how we're spending it. Again, there are rules around how we could spend it, and it's to be used mostly for helping us maintain services. It's not meant to be a stimulus, so it's not going to provide anything outside of what we are currently have been serving or want to build back to. During the pandemic, we also delayed or pushed back some projects, and those were generally in the form of some of our asset management, and that meant anything like repairs for certain types of systems, repairs to facilities, vehicles, etc. Whatever we could push back and do so safely, we did so, but then that backlog is still there, so we now have to come back and address it. Some of those fundings will be put towards that backlog of work that we have. And with all this, we are still not in a position to increase service to pre-pandemic levels, but as we pointed out here just a moment ago, we're not also at pre-pandemic requirements or ridership as of yet. And now I will pass it over to my colleague, Jesse Carter, to talk about the proposed service changes for January 2022.
Thank you, Christina, and I'm sorry, I'm going to leave my moniker up instead of going on video. I have a face that's made for radio, so I'm going to keep with that. But I do want to state that we are currently operating under the pandemic service, as you heard from Christina, where many services have lower than pre-pandemic service levels or service suspensions. The most recent service change efforts back in June and again in September sought to keep up with ridership demands on routes with highest ridership. However, our efforts more recently have been impacted by workforce availability challenges. It is still our intent to monitor and adjust service to meet the transit needs of the district as resources allow. So considerations and challenges through the COVID recovery process have involved, the routes that we are currently operating. Where, of course, as Christina mentioned, we removed the COVID policy capacity restrictions, which allowed, additional ridership growth. And I want to say currently we're even a little bit higher than Christina stated. We're over 50% ridership. We've crested over 200,000 boardings per day. Previously, we saw daily boardings being at about 385,000. So we are growing, but there's still room in the system, on the system. We're also continuing to monitor our ridership, knowing the fact that, any sharp increase in ridership will likely result in the need for additional services. And that could be additional services needed using our Loop Extra service, which is more or less emergency services, which again, tax our operators. We're also looking at the routes that we currently have suspended, and I have noticed there are a lot of comments regarding the Route GS in the chat section, but we're monitoring our like services, so other regional type services, to see if there's increased demand for that family of services. And more recently, we did notice an increase, and responding to that, we have reinstated several regional services along with one local limited service. However, again, we're met with the fact that we have a resource challenge. So we're also looking at the return to workplace and listening to our municipal government along with major employers and looking at their plans for return to work. But we are also, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it's just the truth of the matter. Workforce availability remains a real challenge. We need both bus and train operators. And of course, at this point, we have to match the service that we are providing or we're proposing to the workforce that we currently have. Moving on. The proposed changes for January 2022 can be characterized as a maintenance focused. The majority of the proposal involved analysis for schedule adjustments due largely to increases in traffic volumes and long-term detours due to construction. It looks like most of the cities are taking advantage of the fact that they were seeing lower traffic levels, so they're taking care of some long-needed repairs on streets. With that said, the routine service adjustments schedule changes for January 22 include service changes on the routes 3, route 6, 8, 10, 11, 16, 19, and we're also proposing trip time adjustments for school service on Route 20 and 24, and a shift to accommodate better rail connections on Route 36. We're also proposing running time adjustments on the Route 37, 44, 48, 65, which again, we're looking at trip times to better match school times on the 65, 73. Also running time adjustments on the 76 and the 83, which is, I won't use the word suffering, but maybe I will. It's suffering a long-term detour that has actually impacted its schedule in a big way. And the Route 208, we're also looking at making some schedule adjustments there, and on the Route 324, and a much needed running time adjustment on the AB to DIA or DEN. And also we're looking at running time adjustments to the Bolt and not before mentioned in the initial service changes, the route bound. Service improvements for January 22 proposed are modest. The Route 15 East Colfax, we're proposing to extend selected trips to an Amazon facility that's roughly in the Piccadilly and 14th Avenue location. We're also proposing to add stops onto the Route 15L service. And probably the biggest service change overall would be all of the flex rides that are currently in service we're looking at expanding the span on those services from 5:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. to better serve the work start and quit times. So that concludes the proposal, or describes it in a nutshell, and I want to hand it back to you, Christina.
Great, thank you, Jesse. All right, so before we get into the Q&A component, I just want to provide some background on where your comments go and what happens next. So your comments are included in a staff report that goes to the RTD Board of Directors, and the final date to submit comments to go into that report is October 7th. You could submit your comments by email, so that email address for those on the phone is service service.changes@rtd-denver.com. So again, that's service.changes@rtd-denver.com, or by phone 303-299-2004. And as well by fax, if you've got a fax machine somewhere, that's 303-299-2227. These final adjustments, once they're approved by the board, will take effect on January 9th of 2022. And I'd like to mention that we do these service change proposals about 3 times a year, and we have the public comment period. It's very much like what you've experienced today. But you don't have to be restricted to those timeframes. You can send your comments along to this email address or phone number anytime throughout the year, and it's something that our service planners are ready to listen to. So again, if you happen to miss this time frame, that's perfectly fine. Just know that it will not get into the final comment in the final report that goes to the board on October 7th. Okay, so now let's get into the comments and questions that you might have. If you are joining us by the Teams app, you can go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll call on you and you can ask your question, or you can pop it into the chat, and there our team will see what your question is and help me respond. If you are on the phone, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and unmute your phone, and what that'll do is it'll light your phone number up for me, and I'll call the last 4 digits of your phone number. And when I do, please go ahead and ask your question. So let's begin with those on the phone. If you are on the phone, again, press *6, and that'll unmute your phone, and that'll let me know that you want to ask a question. All right, let's start with our first question on the phone. Phone number ending in 2975.
Yeah, my name's Dave. I live in Boulder. I've been a long time now FF rider, and I was really disappointed not to see the FF2 return or any additions to the FF1. I did a little research, and pre-pandemic, you had 33 services between 6 a.m. to Denver from Boulder, and the same amount returning from 4 to 7 p.m. This is just the FF1 and 2. Currently, you run 12 FF1 services during that same time frame, so almost a 70%, or let's call it a 2/3 decrease, while the rest of the system's only got a 30% decrease. I certainly understand the labor shortage, but I'm trying to understand what it's going to take before next May to get some service back there, because I really worry it's going to be too late. Too many people. I'm in my car right now driving home from Denver. My habits have changed. The FF1's just not convenient. Extra 10 minutes. I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up in the course of a week. What's it going to take? What are your plans to try to get more drivers and jumpstart this thing again? Because I think we're going to lose so many passengers over time. Sorry about the long question.
Great, thank you for your question. Jesse, would you like to start, and maybe Natalie, if you've got some more?
Sure. And looking at or hearing the customer, I have to agree, and I have to apologize. It is one of the things that we would like to have done was to both provide additional service on the Flatiron Flyer along with the GS and a number of other services throughout the district. However, at this point with our current workforce numbers, we just aren't able to do that. It isn't a matter of choice of saying that, hey, we don't want to go back to one of our strongest core routes. We do. That is something that we are certainly planning on, even looking through the reimagine process. The Flatiron Flyer services are key and a part of the core system, and also the GS is included in that. So I understand your frustration, and you're right. It would be to our advantage to get back to normal with the services that we normally would offer along US 36. We just don't have the means to do so at this point in time. If we do gain the means to actually do that prior to May, then that's something the district will have to explore if there's a way of actually providing the service. But as of now, we're struggling with our September level service change, and the number of operators that we currently have or that are coming into the system. We certainly need to increase that. So you'll probably hear from our senior staff and probably from board members as well that we're making efforts to provide incentives for new operators to come on board, and we're doing everything we can as far as recruitment goes and advertising for it. But as you can imagine, with the increased competition, ranging from UPS, FedEx, name any service that actually operates a vehicle, and those are our competitors. And I have to say that we are also in a negotiation year for our contract with our ATU operator. So there's a lot going on. There's a huge effort being made on our part to recruit the operators, and at the same time look at ways that we can definitely sustain and retain our current operators. So I assure you that we're certainly looking at it, and it is an unfortunate thing that we could not provide the higher level of service that we wanted to at this point.
Yes, I can just add to that in regards to Title VI, that as we are making adjustments and changes, everything needs to go through the Title VI transit equity analysis. So if even if we have route as priority, we still need to make sure that we balance throughout the district as to where we put our resources.
Great, thank you both. All right. Again, if you have a question and want to ask it, go ahead and raise your hand. I didn't see any more on the phone, but I'll revisit the phone lines here again towards the end of the meeting. But if you are on the Teams app or joining us on a computer via Teams, go ahead and raise your hand so I could see that you want to ask a question. I also saw very similar questions that not only in team were answering regarding the Flatiron Flyer lines. The general answer is yes, it's very much coming back to our available resources. We are consistently recruiting. We do have a good amount of positions to fill for both bus and rail operators as well as mechanics. So I heard just the other week that we have about 30 mechanic positions that we need to fill, and that is critical because we can't move our buses and system without having those mechanics around to make sure everything is going. And as you can imagine, there's something that breaks every day. So we have a lot of competition out there, and in terms of getting these operators to come and join RTD versus maybe some of the school system or anything else, like Jesse mentioned, FedEx. I did hear this morning that even Jeffco was struggling with providing about 1,500 students with bus rides because, again, there are no operators for their bus lines. With that said, I'll mention that we have noted, and if anyone on the team wants to elaborate, we have noted that some of our flex ride services are being used by some students to get to school. And flex ride, if you're not familiar with, operates very much like a rideshare. It has a territory within the district, and it typically will be able to drop you off and pick you up just about anywhere you'd like to. So go ahead and see our website and look up FlexRide if that's something that interests you, as also a different type of service that RTD provides. Okay, so let me take a look here and see if there are any other questions. All right, we've got some comments here regarding the GS, which I think we already answered. And I'm going to call on Pauline to see if there's anything that I might have missed that you want to bring forward, Pauline.
I wondered, for the person who asked about the Route 21, if you've gotten your question responded to. I think you did. Other than that, I think the team's been keeping up very well with the chat. So yeah, please do raise a hand if you have an additional question.
Great, thank you. So I'll read just a couple here while we're waiting for any additional comments or questions to come in, just for those on the phone. A couple of questions around the 30L, 36L, and the 87L. We had somebody comment that those routes that are off the Federal and Wadsworth area seem to be getting crowded. And so our service planners mentioned that, again, coming back to the operator shortage that we have, we are not reinstating those for January, but again, we continuously look at our services. We're looking at how people are coming back, and to Jesse's point, as things move forward, it doesn't mean that we'll never bring things back, but we have to look at them piece by piece and route by route to see what that ridership demand is. And then we've got to balance it or match it to how many operators we have. So just wanted to make sure that anyone who's on the phone could hear that we were talking about those routes. Along with, again, the other routes that we've already mentioned, like the FF and the GS, same situation. And we're looking at how we can best reinstate, but make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're using our operators in a way that we can maintain this over the long run. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a look here. I don't see any hands raised for anyone that wants to ask a question. But we did have a few people join us, so I will mention that if you are on the phone, please unmute your phone so it'll light up for me. If you'd like to unmute and you're on the phone, press *6. Your phone number will light up, and what I'll do is I'll call the last 4 digits of your phone number for you to ask your question. So let's take a moment again to see if anyone on the phone wants to speak. Okay, hearing no questions from those on the phone, I'll jump back over to our chat. All right, service planning team, is there anything that we are receiving a lot of questions on that we should speak on, at least for those on the phone here?
Not necessarily questions that are being mentioned, but I do want to make sure that it's known that the Reimagine RTD process will be kicking off soon. And through that process, we're also looking at ways that we're going to return to service. Of course, it needs to be fueled by by having enough operators to actually carry out that new mission. But I would encourage anyone who is interested in seeing some of the changes that are being suggested in the chat also join in and speak to their suggestions through the Reimagine process.
Excellent point, Jesse. And we'll be talking about Reimagine RTD during the telephone town halls that start next Wednesday and run through November 2nd. So for those of you that may have joined us late, we have telephone town halls going again for the next couple weeks. You can visit our website and type in the search telephone town halls. It'll bring you to the list of different events where you can pre-register to receive a call. But again, we'll be talking about the Reimagine RTD program. This is actually a project that we started in 2019 before the pandemic, and now it's taken into account just some of the more recent realities that we're seeing. And over the long term, the project was meant to look at travel patterns and make some suggestions for system optimization, but also to look into the future up until 2050. And with some of the realities that we're now facing with the pandemic, it's going to be a critical conversation via the Reimagine project to talk about how we move forward and rebuild our services as we come out of the pandemic. So if you're interested in that, and we will have some opportunities as well as not only through the telephone town hall, but through other channels as we move through this year for you to weigh in, I'd recommend visiting our website for that information. Okay, let's take a look here. I don't see any other questions. Actually, I see, okay, I think we've answered just about everything. One more time, Pauline, am I missing anything?
Just checking over to see if Lisa got her question answered. It looked like it was just getting answered. So
okay.
The team's way ahead.
Okay, good. I do see one that just popped in that's asked if anyone has suggested the reinstatement of Route 125. So who in our team
Actually, I'm going to go ahead and answer. We're missing our West team participant. Unfortunately, he's actually ill today. Route 125, we haven't seen any requests for the 125 by itself as of yet that I am aware of. You might remember one of the last changes we made to the Route 125 was actually a reduction in service going to the northwest segment of the route. And that was due to low ridership. So we have it. It doesn't surprise me that we haven't seen requests for its return at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. We also have a question or maybe a comment. Aiden, I see here that you say Federal Center Station to 64th and Quaker via Youngfield. I'm not clear if that's a comment or a question, but you're welcome to provide a clarification there in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself to ask the question.
And Christina, the slides will be available on the RTD web, right? And tomorrow, yeah.
Yep, our plan is to put the slides up on the website tomorrow, along with the recording of this presentation as well. So we will have it as soon as possible on our website, but tomorrow is the goal.
Christina, Aiden did respond. He's saying that's what the Route 125, the full Route 125 did, and he is correct in stating that.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Mark is asking if we have an update on the FF2, and I don't know if we answered that earlier, but we've got, I think, a couple updates on Flat Earth Flyers. Who would like to respond, Natalie?
Yeah, I just typed it in the chat. So the SDFF2, FF4, GS 128 for North Team, they're all priorities to return as soon as we have the resources. Again, as I mentioned earlier, those additions will have to be balanced against other additions needed perhaps based on ridership and demand because of Title VI equity analysis that needs to occur.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. And the Title VI component for us here at RTD is actually something that is an incredible part, a big part of how we deliver services. And so it guarantees or makes sure that we are not disproportionately affecting certain groups, equity populations that could rely on our services. So sometimes when we're looking at bringing services in or bringing back services in a certain area, we have to, of course, run the analysis and take a look. If for some reason we bring something back that isn't serving the equity populations, then what we have to do is look at everything, the big picture as a whole, and say if we're adding services here, then we equally have to add service somewhere else in the RTD universe to make sure that there is a balance. This I'm doing my best here to provide, I think, just the more simplistic way of how this analysis goes. There's a lot more that goes into it, but in addition to things like we have to have the amount of operators out there, we need to make sure that we are providing service in a way that doesn't impact certain groups negatively. All right, we have a question from Aiden that asks if we suspend routes due to low ridership. And Natalie did respond that routes as priorities are based on demand, as well as based on the Title VI equity analysis that we mentioned. So we do look at ridership, and of course, if there's something with low ridership, we have to balance that and look at where the resources will provide the most service to those that need it the most. So that is absolutely part of it.
And Danny put a question in. He says Title VI equity analysis required for this round of service changes as they appear to be primarily scheduled adjustments. Yes, it is.
Well, actually, no, Natalie, as far as the Title VI, as far as the Title VI analysis is concerned, when there is not a 25% increase or decrease in service hours, it's not required that we do a Title VI analysis. So, but as soon as you make the plan, like let's say you were looking at returning a service, that would be a 100% change to that service's hours, and therefore it would require a Title VI analysis.
Excellent. I think that was a good question, Danny.
So going back to the FF2 question, if I may.
Certainly, yes.
How do you know what ridership you'll have? Because no one's taking the FF1 who wants the express. They will work at home because they don't want to spend an hour on the bus to get downtown. And so it's kind of like, how do you actually know that the FF2 will be populated or not enough to keep it open? Does that make sense? It's like you've stopped it, so no one's taking it. It would take months to figure out it's running again. before
No. So no, we do have ridership data, obviously, from pre-pandemic, and we do have the demand and the requests for the FF2 service. So we have an idea as to what the demand is. We also are keeping an eye on which businesses in Boulder as well as downtown Denver are back to in office, and how much of that is back in office. So we do have an idea as to what that demand is.
Good. Thank you.
But thank you for checking. That's a good question.
It is, and I want to add that, for everyone in the northern area, US 36 corridor, and, areas surrounding that, it isn't a matter, as Notley says, she's ready to go to actually provide and propose the service increases as soon as we have the available operators to carry it out. So Notley has been very, very clear with me as to which routes and which lines are a high priority as far as return to service.
Thank you. And Jesse, with that, I think a very similar question is, well, I think Natalie actually answered it. Someone had asked any idea when the resources might become available for the GS, and Natalie's response was that we do not know currently, but we're hoping for the May 2022 service change that will potentially have it back. I know, that this looks like it's a long way out, but there's when we do service changes, we go through the process of making sure that our operators are available. They, being part of a union, do vote on which routes that they're going to be driving. So that's part of the process in our agreement with them. And therefore, we come to, generally speaking, 3 times a year, we do these adjustments and increments. You won't find us adding or changing a whole lot of service anytime in between, unless it's something that's a critical change. Okay, and along that similar line, we do have a question that's from Aiden that's asking, when do we estimate when the resources will be back to normal? Jesse, do you want to provide a little bit from your perspective on what you've seen, at least? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but maybe a background there on
Right.
sources.
My crystal ball is absolutely broken, and it never worked well for me in the first place. But I would have to say that in looking at our current recruitment efforts, the current class sizes that we're seeing as far as the operators are concerned, we've got a ways to go to get to a point where we can look at having a service change with, an impact of like 48 to 120 hours additional added onto the system. So I do think, as Notley mentioned in the chat, May would be the time frame that we're aiming for right now. However, if somebody invents a cloning device that actually trains operators as it goes along, then perhaps we could do it sooner. But I think the May timeframe is what we're looking at this point.
And with that, I'll put in a plug that we are hiring. We have all our positions posted online. We're always adding positions as we move through the process. If you know of anyone who is interested, please have them check out our website. One question that we generally get is, do I need a commercial driver's license to become an operator, a bus operator? You don't. RTD will train you, will help get that commercial driver's license. And I think that's a pretty big aspect or good key component of becoming an operator. I know people can go elsewhere, but sometimes they've got to pay for their own training and taking of the test. And again, RTD is an agency that helps people get that commercial or CDL license. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and make another call here for any hands up. And again, if you're on the phone, I'm gonna take a look one more time to see if there's any phone numbers that are showing up. If you have a question, actually I see one phone number here, phone number 2975. If you have a question, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, it's just a quick follow-up on the Title VI. If there was the operators available to run that route, does the look back go to the current schedule or go to the pre-COVID schedule for the increase to determine that? Because it does, I guess, Flatiron Flyer demographic is going to require a mitigation service from elsewhere.
Right.
Because it's pretty white collar demographic. Although, and then the other, it's too quick. And then a quick follow up: if there was an increase of drivers, if RTD spruced up its wages, I know hard to do. Would you be able to, in between the January and the May, let's say, run the FF1 up to maybe 6 times an hour during rush hour instead of 4, just to, give some kind of, because I'm one of those FF2 guys who's given up for now. I was riding the FF1 for a while, but so I'm sort of uncounted, but I'm ready to come back when it's somewhat reasonable in service.
Okay. First and foremost, we would welcome you back at any time. However, great question. When looking at Title VI is going to be measured against the actual service change proposal. So it's looking at the service now. It would be measured against, as far as the percent change that it represents is based on the current run board, not looking back to 2019. Second, if we were to, find an island just full of operators looking for work, and we were able to get them here to Colorado and trained and ready to go, it's something we would have to talk with the union. Again, we make changes, and hopefully this answers another question in the chat. We make changes 3 times a year. That's January, May/June, and August/September. Those are agreed upon dates that are covered in our collective bargaining agreement. So if we're not going to make a change in May, we have to go back to the union and negotiate an additional service change. And that's not an easy thing to do during a year in which we are actually negotiating a new contract. So I don't want to get any hopes up high on something like that, but it's possible, but it's one of those things that would be very hard to actually navigate because of the fact that we're in a negotiation year and the time frame between January and May is not that long of a span. So, but thank you for your question.
Great, thank you, everybody. So I don't see any new or fresh questions coming in on the chat. And likewise, I don't see anything coming in via our phone lines. So I wanted to just mention one more time that if there is anything that you think of later, maybe we've missed, go ahead and make sure you email the group that is our service planners and let them know that you've got some questions or there's some additional comments that you needed to make. And if so, you can also, or I'm sorry, if you did want to take a look at these service changes later, you can visit our website and look at our service change page. And there you will see the details that were not only in the presentation, but also some of the details around some of the past changes. And also we will have the presentation as well as the recording up shortly. Okay, I think that is it. We've got maybe just a couple comments in the chat, but nothing that I see needs a response from team that hasn't already received one. And so with that, I would like to thank everybody for your time and definitely appreciate you spending your evening with us, letting us know what your thoughts are. And of course, this was a really good dialogue for our team to have. So we appreciate this. There will be another meeting tomorrow evening. So if there's, if you'd like to, again, visit with us, or if you'd like to share this with somebody who was unfortunately not able to make it, please go ahead and let them know that we'll have another meeting tomorrow evening. All right, everyone, thank you. And thank you, RTD staff, for providing your responses. Any last comments from the team?
I just want to echo what you said, Christina. Thank everybody for coming and making time in their evening for sharing their opinions and getting their questions answered. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
All right, thanks.